So now, last episode was all about infrastructure and city planning. This episode, we're going to be focusing on education and how to master your craft and own that information.
I think the first thing we have to understand is that our definition of education is outdated. When you have a cell phone that you can literally unlock a vast, infinite pool of knowledge to help you write a thorough essay on a book that you've never read before.
You know, I'm definitely guilty of that. I know you guys are too.
But what would that mean for someone like my little brother back home? How do we bridge the gap between the old ways of gathering and retaining information to fully equip ourselves with the daily challenges of life? Or how do we go about as if nothing has changed at all?
Now, I'd like to really focus on the retention portion because I feel like this is really the part that's missing, where we not only get the information but retain it, make it our own so that we can master it. And even shying away from this particular issue, we can see that our educational system hasn't even been properly servicing our educators either. Teachers, for the most part, have now become unmotivated, less and less innovative when it comes to developing lesson plans and overall curriculum. Honestly, I would imagine that this can all be attributed to years and years of teaching to the test and micromanaging from not only school-specific administrators, but each respective school district and their new annual policies, methods of random software updates that are forced on the teachers and students. But the real question is, who's to blame, and why is it so hard for us to make structural change?
In reality, it's true in most cases that our failure to match the progression of the world with the progression of the system that we have put in place, not only to maintain society as we know it, but to also transcend it. Too often we get caught up in maintaining that we are missing all those small parts for what truly looks like incremental change. There's no single party that can be blamed, from our parents to our administrators. We all share a part. What we should be asking is, where do we go from now that we know that something is clearly wrong with our methods?
And as you know, here on the Newark Debater, we always invite a special guest. So today, we actually have the pleasure of having our very own from Rutgers, Devane Murphy, help us facilitate this discussion. So let's give it up for Devane Murphy.
Hello. Today we have one of our very own. Devane is a Newark native and a debater who is ranked the 7th top team in the country and the top 15 speaker in the country. Devane is a junior currently at Rutgers University, and aside from being a full-time student and a debater, Devane teaches debate at a university high school here in Newark.
How you doing today, Devane?
I'm doing all right.
Thank you for being on the show.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can you tell us a little bit about what debate means to you?
Sure.
Good question.
So in order to discuss what debate means to me, I think I have to discuss what debate is. And I think that debate is intensity. It is competitiveness. Quite simply, it's like the purest art form that you can ever take part of. I think that the way in which we can come together, have conversations about myriad of topics when it comes to politics, when it comes to, identity, when it comes to education, how we can be better educators, all those are encompassed by what debate is. So what debate means to me is a training ground where we can find, our leaders, where we can find the people who, can take the next step and, make the real social changes that we need in the world.
Thanks, Devane. So this episode is actually about education in Newark. Okay. So my question to you would be, would you consider yourself to be an educator? And if so, what do you define as to be an educator?
I'll tell you what an educator is first.
Okay.
So an educator for me would be the person that is a vessel that teaches students how to navigate through life. And the reason I say that is because, being an educator is deeper than learning and teaching from a textbook or having particular lesson plans. Rather, it is about teaching students, to be, analyze the world around you, being open to the world around you, having a different worldview, not being closed-minded, being open-minded, understanding that, things will take you out of your comfort zone, but you should still work through that and still engage in the world, teaching you how to be a better way to engage in the world, teaching you, what you can do better, to be an active citizen. or to be a part of an active democratic participation. Do I define myself as an educator? Sure. I think that I spend a lot of time teaching younger students, not just younger students, but people my age, what they can do, you know, how we can work to be better people, what we can do to make society better, and, you know, how we can, you know, take the next step into being better citizens.
So, Devane,
Yeah.
how do you feel Newark should educate its future builders?
Well, I will say this: there is something so special about the students that we have in Newark, the people that we have in Newark, in our community. It's like a particular kind of a swagger, nonetheless, to say the least. But, you know, a way that we carry ourselves, a way that we develop our argument, a way that we think through things, a way that we organize our thoughts, a way that we analyze the world that is just unique to the city. I travel all over the country throughout the year, and one thing is for certain is that Newark debaters and people from Newark just have a certain joie de vivre, so to speak, that makes them special. You know, there are students that go to Stanford University and Liberty University, and all these individuals all resonate from Newark, New Jersey, and, you know, their style, just the way they interact with individuals, is always unique. So the point of me saying that is, what we should do and what we should teach our future builders is that you are from Newark, and that is what makes you special. It is not a handicap. It is not something that stops you from being able to achieve what you'd like to achieve, but rather it makes you better. It probably puts you in a better seat to be able to be a future leader and to be a future builder, for, you know, lack of a better phrase. But, you know, it is something that is core to our value, that we always prioritize our community, we always prioritize our families, and we, you know, really make that a focal point when we take part in our actions. So that is something that Newark teachers and educators should teach our students, that, you know, you're from Newark, you're a Newark debater, you're a Newark student, and that makes you special.
Nice. Thank you so much for that answer. Now, there's this saying that miracles and revolution happen a decision at a time.
Right.
So let's talk about incremental change for a second. What does that mean, and why is it important? Specifically, incremental change.
Incremental change to me is small, deliberate steps that may have short-term effects, but they have long-term implications. And by that I mean, you know, small things that you can do, not even just on an everyday basis, but, you know, on a small-scale basis, that eventually can lead to some type of large-scale social change. In debate, what we do is teach students how to organize and analyze about the world and organize their thoughts to, you know, relay and deploy a public speech. And what that does, and, you know, it's symbolic because it teaches you, you know, how to read text, how to, you know, read things and understand how that interacts with the world. It teaches you how to then organize the thing that you've read into an argument, which means that you are learning how to keep a line of events or keep a chain of events in your mind that, you know, allows you to have better thought process, or allows you to then materialize the things that you want to do. And why is this so important is because that's the only way that real change actually happens.
Absolutely.
There's examples of Newark debaters making so much change in the city. And, you know, to give Evie a shout out, the best example I can give you is the student walkout back in 2010 that was led by tons of Newark debaters, Thais Marquez, Jason Bazil, and Evie was one of the incremental parts of that change. And that was probably one of the biggest social movements I've ever seen at a large scale for children our age, like 15, 16.
Yeah, and it was the first time we had all Newark Public High Schools. We had elected officials, student elected officials, working together to organize something like this, something of that magnitude. Right.
And that's incremental change. That's, you know, getting small steps to unify us. And now what we have are large-scale movements, groups like more social groups like the Newark Student Union or other groups that have been led by some of the student leaders that we identify as debaters. You know, these are people that, you know, dedicate their time, but it only comes from that understanding of skill and how to organize yourself to materialize some type of social change. Mm-hmm. So, you know, that incremental change is probably it's important because it's the first step into actually making a difference. Mm-hmm. And that's why it's important.
I couldn't agree more.
So, we talk about making change, but let's make this a little bit more personal.
Okay.
Uh-oh.
How do you feel is your most memorable experience from something like your school?
From, like, education?
Yes.
All right. That's easy. Sophomore year of high school, I went to Science Park. I was part of the student leadership organization where we would go to certain events where we would have public speakers. It was at TCNJ in Trenton, and the speaker's name was Josh Lundquist. He was a handicapped man. He was missing a leg. I think he lost a leg in war. And he's now a motivational speaker. And one thing he always taught us, or that he always taught us, but in this moment that we were there in the speech, what he said was, don't let, the things that people see about you be the thing that holds you back from achieving something greater than yourself. And I thought that spoke volumes to me for a couple of reasons. First is, I'm from the city of Newark. We're all from the city of Newark, and there's always that negative connotation. I remember there was like a poll that said we were the most unfriendly city. And that's the strangest thing to me, because like these are some of the most influential people I've ever met in my life, some of the most heartfelt people I've ever met. And, understanding that kind of persona that comes with being from Newark does not determine who you are or define who you are. Rather, you can be greater than what people see about you.
So now, what about in debate? Because I know school and debate is a little different.
Separate.
So.
In debate, okay, I got it. It was junior year at there's this tournament called NAUDL, which is the National Association of Urban Debate Leagues, and they had a national championship, and we debated this team from Baltimore. And in debate, there's this technique where you speak faster. It's called spreading, where you're supposed to speak faster than your opponent, and the object is to basically not have a communication or not have a real conversation. It's really to skew the conversation. So what happened was, in our debate, we spread about it, we spread, and they did not engage with us. They did not really have a chance to have genuine communication with us. And what I learned from that was, so often we get caught up trying to be competitive, trying to, be the best that we can be and, win, that we oftentimes cut off the ability to have genuine communication with people. I feel that, when I talk about being an educator and learning how to navigate through life, there's no age limit. There's not a classroom or a particular setting where that education should happen. That interaction that interaction I had could have been something that changed my life. Something could have been something I learned that developed me into being a better person. But instead of doing that, instead of engaging in that conversation, I decided to, not have that communication. And for me, what that stuck to me was that I should be open to having communication, not just having communication, but be open to having constructive debates and having constructive discussions, because that's the only way that we can, be that leader that we want to be. You need to be able to listen in order to lead. And I kind of, that moment was where that resonated with me.
I think that's something that we definitely been trying to touch on, is listening first.
Right.
Because if you don't have a good perspective, that's something also we talk about a lot in this show, is perspective. If you don't have perspective, you can't get to that point of communication.
And the only way you develop perspective is by listening. The only way you develop perspective is by understanding and having conversations with other people's perspectives to see where your perspective stands. That's the point of being open-minded. That's the point of having a wider worldview. That's how you develop that worldview, is just interacting with others. But I agree with you.
So now, we were thinking to take it a step further.
Oh.
Where would you see your city of Newark in 10 to 12 years?
In 10 to 12 years, I see Newark very gentrified, almost completely gentrified. And in the sense that I see that, it's already started. If you go downtown on Broad Street, you see the Blaze Pizza and the Starbucks.
Yeah,
anytime the
really
Starbucks
new.
comes, Starbucks is a Whole Foods down there now. Yeah. But all of that happens, and I think that it's not necessarily a question of what's going to happen. I think gentrification is already in the currents. It's a question of is it going to be a good change or a bad change? And I do think that there are elements of both, right? With gentrification comes moving people out of their communities and moving a lot of mom and pop shops that have been there for a long time and displacing some homes. Yes, that is probably a negative affect. However, developing and having introduction of new foods and new companies, new job opportunities for certain people. I applied to Whole Foods. I don't know about you, but there are tons of new opportunities that you can have because of that, integration of new businesses into the city. So I see that gentrification will happen. But I do see that, it could be good or bad. I also see education changing. And this is kind of happening now with like charter schools being a thing.
Yeah.
And, you know, kind of removing the ability to have genuine curriculums and taking away the teachers' rights to be motivated in the classroom. You know, I know a couple students that go to some of these schools and it's like very militant, and education is not necessarily the greatest. I mean, you learn a lot, but the way you learn is very important. The form of education is very good because content can be great, but the form is important.
And I think that's what we were saying. If the environment isn't right, the students nor the educators can flourish. So if they're given random software updates in August that they have to use all throughout the year, starting in September, while initiating classes and lectures, it tends to be pretty difficult. You have that pressure.
And then the funny part is then you get penalized for not using that right. You know, teachers don't get a chance to actually even test that software. You get penalized for not using that software that you were not properly trained to use. But like, you know, that's kind of a negative kind of view of the future. But I do think that in the next couple of years, you know, with initiatives from Ras Baraka trying to get access to education into the curriculum in 2017, definitely is something that's beneficial. So, you know, it can go either way, but I hope that it goes in a positive
and
direction.
Even every single one of us and you guys out there watching the show, it's about incremental change. That's what we've been really focusing on. So literally every decision you guys make, from watching the show to telling people about it to being more active in local politics, it really does make a difference.
Where do you see debate in Newark going in the next 10 years?
Debate in Newark in the next 10 years. That's a good question.
And I'd like to say the last question would be, where do you see yourself in 10 years?
Okay, so debate in Newark in the next 10 years. Debate in the last couple years has had a weird period where it started to flourish, then it starts to die off, and now it's in this flourishing stage again, where we have like hundreds of middle school students. Like, we're at Frost Valley, New York right now with like 40 high school students that are electrified, on fire, ready to debate, ready to be our future leaders. So I see debate flourishing, becoming back to its roots of being like the core co-curricular activity where we can do that.
And yourself?
Myself in the next 10 years, where I would hope to be is a public advocate for a nonprofit organization, preferably something that deals with felon disenfranchisement. I feel like, you know, being disenfranchised from having ability to get a job or have political participation, those things disallow for engaging with some of the smartest and most seasoned people that we have in this world, which are some felons who have to deal with or are in prison for some of the wrong offenses. So I feel like felon disenfranchisement and being a public advocate for that, that's probably where I see myself, or being a lawyer because I like to.
And making all that money.
You're not kidding.
I'd like to thank you so much for being on our show.
Thank
Your
you for having me.
participation means the world. And that's unfortunately all the time we have for you today. My name is Evilise Tirado.
And I'm Jay Ross.
And you're watching The Newark Debater. Today's episode was all about education in Newark. So here's a little fun facts for you. Did you know that the very first Puritans settled in what we call Newark, New Jersey today in 1666? That was a long time ago. And just 10 years later, they developed the very first school as well in Newark, New Jersey in 1676. Thank you guys for listening, and we'll see you next time.